Some dizzying comments here on Elon Musk in terms of breaking news this morning. Here's what we can report, which is that Elon says that he will only proceed with his $44 billion takeover of Twitter if Twitter can prove that less than 5% of its users are bots. So we explained a little bit of this yesterday, and let's put this up there on the screen. There was a big spat between Elon and Parag Agarwal. Parag put out a multi-post thread about determining spam, bots, and explaining his own proprietary methodology to determine that 5% or so of the people on Twitter are actually bots. Now, Elon replied to this with a literal poop emoji in terms of shit posting, and replied to this, which I think is the crux of the matter. So, how do advertisers know what they're getting for their money? This is fundamental to the financial health of Twitter. Now, here's why it matters. Elon has very high revenue targets that he has to hit per promised things to his investors, who have now promised him tens of billions of dollars in his potential takeover of the company. And now we're in the closing due diligence phase where they're going through the books, and Elon is like, okay, let's see if there actually is 5% or whatever of the users that are bots. Now, you can also couple with that with the fact that Tesla stock is down some 20% in the last month, I believe. That Tesla stock is the predominance of Elon's wealth and also what he was borrowing against whenever it came to the money that he was going to use in order to finance this entire deal. Also, all of his other investors are also venture capitalists and rich people who also rely on a complex, margin lending system in order to access a lot of this capital. Now, here's the other thing. Elon gave an interview yesterday to the All In podcast. Let's put this up there on the screen. Now, here's what he was talking about. He says, the more questions I ask, the more my concerns grow. Could it be done at a lower price? Maybe. He continues, I was relying on public filings. So the reason that this matters is that he is saying and essentially accusing Twitter publicly of lying to him about the number of bots that are on the platform.
And lying to that.
And lying to the SEC, yeah. Lying to investors, lying to the world, which, I believe that. I certainly believe that that's possible. All right, here's the thing about these fake statistics. Parag's thread was, creating this complex methodology, and it just conveniently arrives around 5%. I'm like, listen, the way and how you define a bot, in terms of the posting schedule, etc., I'm sure can inflate it whichever way you want.
Well, he also was trying to, because Elon had said, we're going to take 100 random accounts and we're going to test it to see if they're bots, and you guys should do the same. Right. And so the other thing Parag was trying to do is say, you can't do it with just publicly available data. You got to have what we have on the back end, because you may see an account that looks like it's like a first name and a string of numbers, and it looks like and they've got weird tweets and it looks like a bot. But when we look on the back end, there's good reason to believe that it's actually a real person.
Right. So look, I have no idea, all right? The point is is this about bots or is this about negotiation?
Obviously.
I'm willing to bet that a lot of this is about negotiation. Let's put this up there on the screen from my friend Alex Kantrowitz. He says, the Musk negotiation playbook. Make offer, agree to deal, wait for market softness, devalue the asset via public disparagement, pay half. And guess what? It's working. Twitter stock is significantly down in the process. And just looking at the transcript of the All In podcast, it's very interesting because Elon says, I'm still waiting for some sort of logical explanation for the number of fake or spam accounts on Twitter. Twitter is refusing to tell us, so this just seems like a strange thing. Jason Calacanis asked him specifically, they say, Elon, that life is a negotiation, so at a different price, it might be totally viable deal, correct? Elon, it is not out of the question, but the more questions I ask, the more my concerns are growing. At the end of the day, it has to be fixable within a reasonable time frame without revenues collapsing along the way and all of that stuff. I really need to see how these things are being calculated. It can't be some deep mystery that is more complex than the human soul. I think we can apply the scientific method and try to figure out what's really going on. So I think that in the context of the market crash, it makes a hell of a lot of sense in order to use whatever leverage that you can in order to close this deal at a much lower price. Elon not only has less capital available to him compared to how much he was worth just a month ago, but Twitter stock is also down significantly as well. And here's the other thing. What are these people gonna do? Now, I said yesterday about the breakup fee. there's some interesting analysis. Stoller actually sent me a message this morning, which is that the Musk it's not his only problem. He actually has to pay that only if the financing falls through or if regulators block the deal. But if he voluntarily walks away, he is actually theoretically on the hook for all $44 billion and can be sued in a Delaware chancery court. That was the same analysis given.
Well, probably not though, if he can credibly argue that they were lied in their public filings that he, was basing his decision-making on, right?
Right. And here's the thing. Look, we're not lawyers. We have no idea. And I bet you can contest this case all the way to the bank for billions and billions of dollars on both sides in legal fees.
Yeah.
So my guess would be that this is some sort of negotiating contract. Ben Thompson also had a newsletter out this morning from Stratechery. He says the contract gives Twitter the right to force Elon to close the deal and to put up $27.5 billion of equity that he personally committed as long as his debt financing is available. So it does seem that Twitter has some leverage on their side. I would put this in the terms of the Musk playbook, in terms of publicly leveraging his immense popularity, brand, and megaphone in order to, hammer the stock price and try and negotiate on the outside in order to bring the price down, maybe, by a couple $1 billion, or maybe even more significantly than that, especially if he can prove some sort of lie in the SEC filings, which would then make them legally viable and bring that all the way down. All of this is really just a long way of saying that there's complicated stuff going on. And one thing to look past is this, that producer James found, let's put this up there on the screen, which is that a longtime Elon Musk backer says that the Twitter deal will close at a lower price.
Guy has some impressive eyebrows.
Exactly, yeah, he really does. So this is Tim Draper. He's an early investor in both Tesla and SpaceX, and he co-founded a venture capital firm that's actually sinking $100 million into the bid. Here's what he said when he was asked about whether the Twitter deal will close at a lower price. He says, I think so. I think he's going to get a better deal because he found out whatever 2/3 of users are bots or something. So this is somebody who is committing equity to the deal. We don't necessarily know how much he has, but at the very least is somebody who has his own money on the line, who's backing Elon's venture here, and all of this should be viewed within that context. I gotta say, this is probably the most exciting corporate takeover story that we've seen in since the 80s in terms of all of the jockeying that's going on.
It's
publicly.
Very dramatic. I mean, I don't think it's right that you should be able to, and he's done this in the past, manipulate markets with his statements, especially intentionally. I mean, this is what he's been accused of and actually had a consent decree with the SEC about before. So it is a pattern of behavior that I think is sort of gross. I mean, he did this even with the initial announcement where we learned that he was a 5% stakeholder or whatever it was. Yeah, and he didn't file that disclosure with the SEC and was able to profit off of that delay and failure to file in time with his public comments, again, benefiting him. Listen, I have no idea what this dude's intent is. I definitely don't take him at his word. There's no way that the real problem here is the percent of bots on the platform. And you know this because he's not even planning on using advertising revenue as the primary source of revenue moving forward. His plan, which many analysts have said is not feasible and is unrealistic, is to get way more users on the platform and then charge a subscription fee for a certain percent of those users, which, that piece of it to me is not a bad direction to go in whatsoever. I think it would be a lot better if our social media networks, especially the ones critical to free speech, were more dependent on treating you as the customer versus these, advertisers and the sort of incentives that comes with just generating eyeballs for advertisers. So I don't mind that direction, but it just shows you that, his business plan is not particularly dependent on whether he can jack up the price with advertisers or not. So ultimately, this is either a head fake to, push a better negotiating position, try to get a better deal now that Twitter's stock is way down and now that his net value is way less. Or it could be also ultimately, if he can prove that they have way more bots on the network than they were claiming, it could be an excuse to totally walk away from the thing and say, you know what, this is not feasible ultimately.
Yeah.
I really have no idea.
I have no idea either. I do think that Twitter might be lying here, though. I mean, just in terms, okay, when I say lying, misrepresenting.
Yeah, I
think that their methodology just seems so
I don't doubt that at all, but I also don't think that's a real answer.
I don't think it's a real answer either. I'm also not going to shed a tear for any of these investors on either side of the other. So anyway,
no, absolutely not.
We'll keep you guys updated in terms of what's happening.
Indeed. Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.